Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning to talk about self-care for the sandwich generation. I'm Johanna Dunlevy, the Wellness and Marketing Manager for Employee and Family Resources, and I am a sandwich generationer. I am here to talk to you about self-care, give you some reminders of the importance of self-care, regardless of your status as a sandwich generation caregiver or not. We'll take a look at what the sandwich generation is, kind of who makes up that generation, and then we'll do a deeper dive on self-care. And in true sandwich generation form, I'm working from home with a sick child today, so unexpected. And I think we'll be good for the next half hour, but if you are a sandwich generation caregiver, you know that you have to always kind of have a plan B and a plan C, and sometimes those plans don't work out, and so you end up maybe working from home with a sick child or having to cancel a meeting to take care of an elder parent. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things and what you can do to make sure to give back to yourself as you continue to give so much to others. All right, so I wanted to start with just kind of this idea of a to-do list, and this is not my to-do list today. And it's most likely none of your to-do list, but can you relate to this to-do list? The first is register your kids for swim lessons at 6 a.m. to make sure they get a spot. And then you need to call your mom's physician to review dementia screening results and schedule an appointment for a tour of the assisted living center that you're thinking about moving her to. Oh, and you also have to book a flight for a work trip you have coming up for Cincinnati. And then you have to do kind of the day-to-day, groceries, post office, you've got a pet, you're going to the vet, and picking up the kids from school, and changing the ticket from Cincinnati to Sarasota to assist your dad who broke his hip. Find someone to stay with your kids all day, every day for several days. And so this is somewhat of an exaggerated to-do list for someone who could fall into the sandwich generation, but I also think that for a lot of people, this is their reality. They're trying to juggle their commitment and role as a parent, their commitment and role to their own parents, and work and life. And at EFR, we say life happens, we're here to help. And so I'm going to give you some ideas for how you can kind of lean on EFR for some support and resources if you are feeling overwhelmed with your daily to-do list as it relates to your caregiving responsibilities. Well, what is self-care? So let's talk about self-care for a moment. And by definition, it's the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. And I have practice and taking action bolded because those are similar to the second definition, the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. So self-care is essentially giving back to yourself to help maintain, preserve one's own health. And in the second definition, where it says in particular during periods of stress, when you think about your life, there are going to be times in your life that are very, very stressful and times that are more calm. And then there's a lot of that in between time. And it is stressful being a parent. It's stressful being a caregiver for any individual. You might be parenting young children, teenagers, you may have adult children that you're still responsible for to some extent. Maybe it's financially responsible for them. Maybe they're still living with you, and so you're still very involved in their lives. And you may have parents that you're also taking care of, and that can be really stressful, especially when maybe they don't live in the same community and you don't have all the information you need on a regular basis, or maybe they do live in your community and you're with them constantly. So self-care is really taking care of yourself to preserve your own health and well-being, and it can be especially important during periods of stress. So when we talk about the sandwich generation, who exactly are we talking about? So the sandwich generation is mostly adults in their 40s. If you look at this graph here, this is by the Pew Research Center. This is going to reflect the percentage of adults who have a parent over the age of 65 and have a child younger than 18, or have provided financial support to an adult child in the year prior to the survey that this came out. So it affects most individuals in the 40 to 49 age group, but it also affects people in their 30s and people in their 50s and some people in their 60s. So it all kind of depends on how old your parents were when you were born, how old you were when your children were born, and and so when you think about it, I became a sandwich generation in my 30s because I had an older father and mother at the time of my own birth. They were considered older parents, especially for the 1980s when they had me. So I became a sandwich generation in that 30 to 39 age group. And it really affects all adults across about 23% of that population. So if you're on here, my suspicion is that you probably are sandwich generation, which is why you were drawn to this topic. And if you're not sandwich generation, you may be someday. Looking more at some of this Pew Research, about 1 in 5 sandwiched adults in their 40s and 50s have both a minor child and an adult child they've helped financially. And then you can see among those in the sandwich generation, the percent who have a living parent age 65 or older and have a child under 18 and have provided financial help to an adult child and have done both. And so again, most people with children under the age of 18 are going to fall into that 30 to 39 category. Most of the people who have provided financial help to an adult child are going to be older. They're going to fall into that 60 plus category. But a lot of people are doing both. And if you look at that far right column, in that 40 to 49 and 50 to 59 age group, it's 22 and 21% respectively. So when you get into your 40s and 50s, the chance of taking care of both ends of the generation spectrum just greatly increases. So when you think about the sandwich generation, and if you're someone who is taking care of your own children and your parents, and it may not be your parents, it may be elder loved ones. I know people that are responsible for maybe an aunt or an uncle or an in-law. A lot of times it's your in-laws. There are different variables that are going to factor into how stressful your circumstances are and what your circumstances look like. So the first is your family makeup and dynamic. So, do you have siblings that can help? Do you have siblings that are willing to help, right? Two very different things, having siblings that can help and having siblings that are able and willing to help. All of that is going to factor into how much of the caretaking responsibility you assume for your parents. The relationship status of the caregiver. So if you're someone who's single parenting, and so you are doing it on your own with your children, but you're also taking on the responsibility of elder loved ones, that's going to be much different than someone who is, in a partnership, co-parenting under the same roof, or even co-parenting under different roofs with support that way. Relationship status of the elder parent. So my dad passed away in 2021 and he was single. My parents divorced when I was younger. My mom remarried and my dad never remarried. So I can tell you that because my mom remarried with my stepdad, we have another person who can help with anything that's going to come up with her. So when my mom went through breast cancer treatment about 15 years ago, we had my stepdad. He was there to make sure, that she was getting to her appointments and just to make sure that she was okay. When my dad had cancer about 5 years ago, he was on his own. So it was up to his children to help him get to those appointments. So the relationship status of the elder parent makes a huge difference. Your proximity to elder parents. So in my situation, my mom lives on the other side of the country, though my brother lives closer to her, and then my sister and I live in the Midwest, and we were closer to my dad. So it can really make a big difference with how much you can help and how stressful it is helping based on where you live and where your elder parents live. The health and ability of elder parents, some individuals can make it into their 80s and 90s without very many health issues pop up, and they may live independently that entire time. And other people have health issues at a much younger age. So with my mom, her cancer came on in her early 60s and she thankfully survived it. With my dad, his cancer came on when he was 80. So he was a little bit older. And so there's a big difference between someone in their early 60s and early 80s with any kind of health issue. There's certainly cultural and familial expectations, and so this is a whole different topic, but in certain cultures, there's a greater expectation to take care of elder loved ones, to live with your elder loved ones or invite them to live with you, different familial expectations as it relates to, are the sons doing the work? Are the daughters doing the work? And that's just, something that's ingrained in different cultures and certainly a variable to consider. Financial circumstances, your own and that of your elder loved ones. And then your support network and resources. And so as I look at this list, the biggest variable that you have the ability to change or work on is that last one. So a lot of those are really out of your control, if not entirely out of your control. But your support network and the resources you have available are certainly going to make a difference as it relates to your ability to care for yourself and a loved one. And you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you don't ever give back to yourself and you're constantly giving to others, it's going to be really challenging to continue doing that. You will eventually burn out, right? You cannot pour from an empty cup. And so what we're going to talk about is 8 ways to minimize stress for the sandwich generation. And so this is just a little graphic, and it's called the sandwich generation because you're in between and you've got your parents or elder loved ones and their needs, and you've got your own needs with work and your home and financial concerns, and then you've got the little ones. No matter how little or big they are, they're going to take up a lot of your time and energy as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about as we explore these 8 ways to minimize stress is boundaries. And boundaries are important because they help you identify what's most important, and they can help others recognize, kind of where they can come in and where they need to just kind of step back and say, okay, I get it. Boundaries can be really challenging for people, especially if you're someone who has a hard time saying no, or you have, kind of an inclination to want to always help and extend yourself, whether it's extend your time, extend your money. And boundaries is a whole other topic that we could do a webinar on, and we probably will someday. But when you think about boundaries, just think about, do you have established boundaries? So a boundary that I have with my work life is that I don't keep my work email on my phone. I have it on my iPad so I can access work email when I'm not working, but I don't want to kind of be pestered with the notifications when I'm trying to take care of my family, take care of myself. And in my role at EFR, I can do that, right? I understand people have different roles and responsibilities across different organizations. So that's one boundary that I established. Or another boundary, I'm not going to generally text people before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m. unless there's something urgent going on, because I want to have some screen-free time. So those are very small examples of boundaries, but they're still boundaries and they can really help. So what are your boundaries? Is it that you reserve or carve out an hour a day for yourself, 10 minutes a day for yourself? If you're someone who's kind of going, ooh, an hour a day for myself, wow, I don't know if I can do that, then start smaller. But boundaries can be really helpful in all aspects of life and across all relationships. The second tip is to start your day on full. So I just mentioned that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So if you start your day on empty, it's going to be much harder to kind of move through that day with ease. And so, what can you give back to yourself first thing upon waking? And it took me a long time to figure out what that could be for me, but I ended up kind of going with an earlier wake up time for me, because I am someone who needs some alone time throughout the day. And when I'm parenting a small child who's still quite dependent on me, I don't get that if I sleep in on the weekends or if I get up when she gets up for a school day, work day. So for me, it was kind of looking at my schedule and thinking, well, if I really want to do something to give back to myself, I'm going to have to do that before 7 a.m. And what does that look like? And so for me, it's sometimes gentle yoga, reading, sometimes it's just being by myself and making breakfast, listening to a podcast, but they make a big difference. Those things make a big difference in the rest of my day. And so on a day like today, when I woke up thinking that it was just going to be a regular day, I was going to go to work, take her to camp. But then when she woke up sick and everything changed, I'm so glad that I had that hour to myself this morning, because I'm probably not going to get any more time today. So start your day in full. What does that look like? Is it having a coffee by yourself? Is it reading the newspaper? And that even seems kind of like an antiquated suggestion at this point, because most people don't get newspapers, but you most likely get my drift. What is it that you can do that will kind of fill your cup? As it relates to communication, especially communication related to your elder loved ones, when there's siblings involved, sometimes the communication can get really tricky, because oftentimes there's one sibling who has more information than others, because maybe that's the sibling that lives the closest, that the elder parent communicates with the most, that might be the healthcare contact. And so sometimes that sibling holds all the information, and the other siblings don't always get the full story, or they're getting it, but the person who's holding it, tells her brother one thing or sister one thing, and it might be the same story, but it's taking up a lot of energy and time. So streamline communication. So I just came up with, Dad fell. How? Not sure. When? Call Tim. So if you can find ways to streamline communication between your parents, your siblings, anyone on the caregiving team. And I understand that in some families, it's not that always a sibling. So it could be that, your parents live in Texas and you live in Iowa, but you have a cousin that lives in Texas, and that's kind of the primary point of contact for your parents there. So whoever is in that group makeup, try to streamline your communication, whether it's through an app or through a group chat, a group text. That way everyone's receiving the same information. You don't have to, spend 2 to 3 times the time communicating what's going on. I know that when my dad was going through his cancer treatment 5 years ago, I was the one that had gone up to the hospital with him, and I just did a group text. That way I would have to say whatever needed to be said or report back the findings, in one message to everyone, and then we were all kind of on the same page, because it gets tricky to manage emotions, your own and other people's, and family dynamics are interesting, and they're always kind of shifting and changing. So when everyone can be informed, who needs to be informed, if you can streamline that communication, it can be really helpful. And the same goes for, with kids, if you and your spouse, partner, co-parent can streamline any communication about kids, that can be really helpful too. Having open conversations. A lot of times people show up in the workplace and they may appear to have it all together, but inside they are really weighed down with what's going on at home. And so if you are comfortable having open conversations with colleagues, team members, leaders or supervisors, I'm going to have to work from home today because I have a sick child, or my dad's having surgery in October and I'd like to have some flexibility during this week. Having those open conversations versus holding it all in can open up the opportunity for you to maybe have opportunities to have more support, more resources. It can give people a perspective that maybe they haven't considered. I know oftentimes it can be really easy to judge what's going on, why someone might be missing a deadline at work, or why someone might be not responding as quickly to messages, or why someone has kind of isolated themselves away from any kind of team social gathering. And so when you're comfortable sharing at whatever level that is, I think having those open conversations can be really helpful. And this can be certainly for the workplace, but also in friend groups, or even, I think a lot of times people kind of put on a strong face for their partners, and letting them know, hey, I need more help right now with the kids because I've got a lot going on with mom or dad. Acceptance is huge, right? Accepting that things will feel unbalanced. So every day it's kind of like my kids, my parents, everything else, right? What is it that you're going to focus on today, and kind of remembering that this too shall pass, right? So accepting that you don't have control over everything, accepting that these are the circumstances, and this is what your life looks like right now, and that may not change, but you could leverage different resources and assistance to help you get through this time. but accepting that things will feel unbalanced. I think for many people, especially if you're transitioning into this generation, right, where maybe you've been a parent for a while, but your parents haven't needed a lot of help and you're kind of feeling that swing. Life is going to look different, you know, certainly for a while. And if you're someone who has never, you know, been a parent or taken care of parents, and all of a sudden you're kind of pushed into both. For me, that happened within about a year, you know, becoming a mom, and then with some things that popped up with my dad. That was a big change. And when I look back at what my life looked like prior to being a mom and prior to some of the things that came up with my dad, it was like my life looked a lot different. I had a lot more self-care in my life, but things are never going to be equal. Things will never be balanced, but you can kind of find or sprinkle opportunities to give back to yourself. And I think that's the most important aspect of self-care, is thinking about what you need to fill your cup and then doing it occasionally. This one goes back to the boundaries. Do you have a no list, or nope, not going to do it? And so a big part of setting boundaries is kind of honoring no, saying no. And you don't have to give a reason. I think that's hard for a lot of people. They may want to explain or over-explain or justify why they're saying no. No, I'm not able to do that. Thank you for asking. I'm not able to do that. And this can be challenging because sometimes you're saying no to your parents, to a sibling, to, you know, something that's really important to you. Maybe you've been volunteering for a really long time with an organization that you feel passionately about. It's probably time to kind of reframe and adjust. Like, does that still fit in my life? So, you know, there are things that you might have to say no to or give up temporarily, and they can come back around when your life changes. But being able to say no, or at least kind of listing out all the things you're doing and identifying what is on this list that maybe is unnecessary or just doesn't need to be done or doesn't need to be done by me, can be really, really helpful. So saying no. I say this when I deliver my presentation on stress. I heard it at a conference years ago, and I really love it. When you say yes, are you saying yes to stress? When you say yes, are you saying yes to stress? And knowing that it's okay to ask for help. So sometimes when you're being asked to do something or, you know, fill in for someone, it's, you want to say no and you don't know how to say no. Sometimes it's no, I can't do that. I need help. Or yes, I can do that, but I'm going to need help. So it's a lot to take on everything as a caregiver. It's a lot to be a caregiver for, you know, one person, whether it's one child or your group of children. It's a whole other thing to be taking care of both ends of the spectrum. So it's okay to ask for help, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those resources that are available through EFR and through your EAP benefits. So seek support. These are life experiences that you're not meant to have lived on your own, right? There are a lot of people going through similar experiences, and the more you can kind of connect and relate to people, I think the more helpful it can be. So your EAP benefit is going to be tremendously helpful to kind of give you options and opportunities to take care of yourself and even your loved ones, but also just kind of thinking through, in addition to your EAP network, what are some other resources? So I know when my dad when his health was failing, because he was still living in the town that we grew up in, but none of us live there any longer, we knew some people. So, hey, do you know someone that can come and clean his house? Do you know someone that can drive him to his doctor's appointments? It wasn't realistic for any of my siblings, because of our proximity, to make those every appointment, right? We did our best to be there when we could, but sometimes we had to say, no, we can't. But I'm going to find someone who can, or I'm going to suggest that you call, your friend. So support can be everywhere, especially with your EAP benefit, but sometimes support is just kind of lurking around the corner and you don't even know who's willing to help because you haven't even thought about asking for help. So when we talk about EAP benefits that can assist the sandwich generation, the first would be counseling. Counseling for members of immediate household is available to you. So if you have EFR's EAP, everyone in your household has access to counseling sessions. And keep in mind that everyone is affected by the stress of your circumstances. So you're feeling stressed and you're feeling a weight, but so is everyone else, because relationship dynamics maybe are shifting and time and attention is not maybe the same as it once was. So counseling is certainly a resource that you have access to, as do anyone in your immediate household. Elder care resources, we EFR can help identify options and resources to help your elder loved ones. So I think this is helpful for anyone taking care of an elder loved one, but especially people who are not living in the same community or even the same part of the country. So my mom, for example, lives in Arizona. I wouldn't know who to call. I would have no idea. I would start Googling it and I would probably get really frustrated and I wouldn't know who to call. But I could call my EAP benefit. I could call EFR and EFR could help me identify options in her zip code to help her. And so don't, underestimate kind of the different benefits that you can get from EFR. Legal consultation. Legal consultation can help you navigate questions related to estates, wills, healthcare directives, anything like that. I think oftentimes something that I've learned since my dad passed away is that the caretaking just looks different. So after he died, there was still a lot of things that we needed to do for him. We needed to sell his home. We needed to, contact a bunch of different people, the banks. We had to, reach out to life insurance and his retirement and all of those things. And a legal consultation can be really helpful. And I've actually used that benefit for something related to my dad passing away. I just had a question, I didn't know who to ask, and I was able to use that benefit and I had my answer within 15 minutes. So I think legal consultation can be really helpful when your elder loved ones are alive, but they can also be helpful, after they've passed away. And then Together All, which is our new platform that helps connect people with people who have similar lived experiences. And so I'll talk a little bit about that after I remind you that self-care is not indulgent or selfish. Don't ever forget that. Together All, I'm going to leave this slide up here for a minute or two because I think it's important to explore. It's a platform that's completely anonymous. You can access it through this QR code, or you can navigate to EFR.org, and under the Employee Assistance Benefits tab, you can link to it. But Together All is a great resource to help you connect with people who have similar lived experiences. And I think that's one of the things that I've benefited a lot from in my life, is connecting with people who could relate to me. And a lot of them were strangers who I met through support groups, because I felt like my friends had kind of already heard a lot about what was going on in my life, and it was for the most part consuming everything that we were talking about. And so when you can connect with someone anonymously in a safe space where you have no obligation or commitment to circle back with them and let them know how things are going, because I think for me that part kind of gets exhausting, especially when I was really helping towards the end of my dad's life. Like, people want updates because they care about you. Sometimes it's just like, I don't know if I have the capacity to keep updating people. But I really want to talk to someone. I want that support. So sometimes it's best to come from a platform like Together All, where it can be anonymous and where people are not going to constantly ask for updates. So please consider joining Together All and using your EAP benefits. Like I said, you have access to a lot of benefits through EFR's EAP, and the ones that I highlighted specifically, I think, can help for the sandwich generation. And to access those benefits, you simply call 800-327-4692. And we do answer 24/7. We have licensed phone counselors who will answer the phones, and they are always here to help. And it's help for you and anyone in your household. So if you have a child under the age of 18, you can call on their behalf and set up benefits. If you have a child or an adult dependent who's 18 or over but living in your household, they can also use the benefits. They would just need to set those up on their own. So we're right at the half-hour mark. I would like to open it up for questions or comments. There's no ability to unmute in this platform, so you could send a chat and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this topic or your EAP benefits. And if there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up by saying thank you to everyone who joined today. I hope that you took away something that you can apply to your life or to someone else's life. Yes, this was recorded. That is one of the questions that came in. So we'll have this on our website probably by the end of the day today. So you can watch this again or share it with people. And, you know, I always say, a lot of times information I get through the EAP, I like to share with my family members who don't live here. They don't have access to our EAP because they don't work for a company that has EFR's EAP, but sometimes these webinars can be helpful anyway, just as long as they know they don't have access to the EAP. But for a lot of people, it's just, you know, sharing with your colleagues, I think, can be really helpful. So thank you, everyone. Make it a great day, and don't forget to give back to yourself today.